Well, welcome everyone to this afternoon's webinar. The topic is about putting together targeted and engaging job applications. And I will be running the session, and my name is Susan Pincus. I'm the careers professional with the College of Law. And just a little bit about me before I introduce you to Jackie Steffen, who'll also be co-facilitating. My background is in human resources, and also I spent quite a significant time recruiting. And after leaving human resources, I went to work with law students and worked on their employability and building up their professional profiles and to assist them in their transition into working as lawyers. So that's just a little bit about me, and pass you over to Jackie Steffen.
Hi everyone, so I'm Jackie, as Susan had said. I'm the Relationship Manager at the College of Law Victoria. My background is I was admitted to practice, feels like 1,000 years ago, and spent about 4 years in private practice in insurance law, mostly PI and injury, and then worked as manager in claims for professional indemnity, professional risk, before moving to the college as the relationship manager.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jackie. So just a couple of things just before we get started. In terms of housekeeping, what we'll do is we'll run through the PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll leave the questions until the end, and we'll try and answer as many of the questions as we can in the session. And if for some reason we run out of time, we'll be able to still access your questions, and we will get back to you with answers to those. And the other thing is that you will also receive some pro forma documents that we've put together. So we've got some pro forma CVs, one for an earlier or a new lawyer starting their career, and one for a later lawyer or a career changer. We're also going to have cover letters as well as a checklist. But it's just important just to bear in mind that it is really, really critical when you're putting your documents together that you always need to look at the job in question. So it's very, very hard to put an application together without targeting it and customizing it to the actual job. So I have also included a mock job in that. All right, so let's get going. So job applications, in terms of what I mean there, we're talking about cover letters, resumes, key selection criteria, and online applications, which are very, very common as well, where you might also have to answer some specific behavioural questions as well when you're putting your applications together. And these obviously will vary job by job in different employers as well, and they will often give you specific instructions that you will need to follow. So it's really, really important that you pay attention to that. So why are job applications so critical? Well, just drawing back from my days when I used to be a recruitment manager, it was not uncommon to receive hundreds of applications. So if you are looking at clerkship positions and graduate positions, it is not uncommon to get in the hundreds. So if you picture that you've got someone at the other end that is confronted with this huge, huge pile of applications, and they're having to get a short list together, they're going to be probably giving your application up to about 20 seconds before they're making a decision. So it's really, really critical therefore that you're able to capture their attention really, really quickly and for your application to stand out. So that's what we're going to be covering today. Okay, so what we're going to go through today is we're going to start off and get you into the mood by doing a true or false quiz. Then we're going to talk about the principles behind a strong job application. And you'll also often hear lots of people will have different opinions about what makes a good job application or what makes a good resume as well. So there are no fast rules about that. However, saying that there are definitely more effective and less effective resumes as well. We're going to look at the key skills that employers are looking for. We often call these the employability or essential skills. We're then going to cover the hierarchy of evidence. So where should you be drawing your evidence from to support your application? We'll then also focus on cover letters, because cover letters are absolutely critical. You are not able to just upload your CV. You will typically have to also do a cover letter, and it's important and your opportunity to build a real connection with your audience. And that is something that we'll talk about. How can you actually do that? And then, as I mentioned before, we'll go through to questions after that. Okay. Sorry, just having a little bit of a glitch here with my... Sorry, it's funny. Okie doke. So if we go through the quiz now, there's 10 questions. And what I want you to do is take about 3 minutes and jot down your answers. And then at the end of the session, we'll go through and give you the answers to that. So if everyone just takes a couple of minutes now just to go through those, that would be awesome.
Just with the true or false?
Yeah, true or false. So there's 8 questions here, and then I've got a couple more on the next slide. So I'll just give you a little bit longer. Hopefully you're finding them easy. Couple more minutes. I think we're ready to move on to the next 2. And then we've got a rating out of 10, but don't worry about that yet. We'll come back to that later. Okay, all right, well, we will keep going now. All right, so in terms of what makes an application stand out, I think the biggest thing from my perspective, and I'll be interested to hear what you have to say, Jackie, too, is that often when we apply for a job, we rush into it. So we typically get so busy with life that we might leave it to the last minute. So we might not plan the time that you need to put into putting a tailored and a customised application together. So it's really, really really, really important that the first thing you do is that you actually step back, you read the application or the job vacancy really, really carefully, and you reflect and you do your research. So you think, what are they really looking for here? What's the sense of the organisation? What's the feel, the culture that I'm getting a sense of here? What are the values? What are the goals? What are their practice areas? What are some of the words that they're using? So, in other words, really, really thinking about what is this job about and what is this organisation about, as opposed to just pulling out a previous application, changing the name of the company and sometimes getting it wrong. It does happen, believe it or not, and actually focusing on that and then starting your application. So really, really important that you treat each application as if it's the only one. So it's really, really unique. And that comment about your application being a marketing brochure and the analogy of a brand with promise is really, really important. So I like to use the analogy of a soup can or a cereal box label. So if a company is shopping you, do you want to show up as a generic label or a label with a brand promise? And I remember once working with a lecturer many, many years ago, and I loved it when he said to me, do you want to be Giorgio Armani, slick and sophisticated? Or do you want to be a $2 shop where your application, I suppose, is all over the place? So thinking about that analogy is quite a fun way of doing it. So write with authenticity and ownership. So I can't stress how important authenticity is, and it really, really comes through, as opposed to writing an application that just sounds like you haven't really put a lot of thought and effort into it. Important to demonstrate and evidence your skills and your achievements. Otherwise, it's just words, really words that are empty, that don't provide any backup. So important to think about your evidence. And one way of thinking about your evidence of your skills and of your achievements is to use a rule called results by action. So where you start off by saying that the results were that I was nominated for 2 awards for outstanding customer service as a result of my outstanding product knowledge. So something like that. So always start with what the result was and then what the action was. And 4S rule, simple, structured, succinct and significant. And don't forget the getting someone else to come in and proof check. Anything else there, Jackie, that you want to add?
Just to reiterate what you've said, Susan, really important to make sure that you're not just copying and pasting, because different firms have different practice areas, and maybe at the start they might read as if they're quite similar between the firms. They're actually very different, and if you can make sure you've captured that in your application, you would be much better placed. And definitely get a separate set of eyes. I know when I sent off all my applications for summer clerkships and articles back then, it was invaluable to have somebody else. Certainly doesn't have to be anyone in the legal profession. Anyone can read a letter and pick up any typos or grammatical errors. So definitely a second set of eyes.
Yeah, and there's some percentage that for the number of errors that you make, your likelihood of getting to the next stage diminishes rapidly. So particularly if you say that attention to detail is one of your key skills, and then your cover letter's full of mistakes. So very, very easy to overlook it, particularly when you've been working on a document for so long.
Yep.
Okay, so in terms of what I mentioned before, it is so critical to research the organisation and the role. So there are a list of the different areas to research. And what is particularly of interest is the values. So values has become like a really, really big thing with organisations, and they often want to recruit people that align to their values and to their culture as well. So you I think you set yourself up well to explore what the company values are and to even think about which ones resonate with you most, and then to give an example that demonstrates that as well. Also getting an understanding for what the role involves and who your interactions are with, and even like the opportunities for progression as well. And if I look at some of the information from an international law firm called Bird and Bird, they talk about the importance of research, and they say, make sure you do thorough research about the firm. If you genuinely want to work at a firm, this will shine through. So make sure you're aware of the areas of expertise and what sets the firm apart from their competitors. And they really value you understanding their point of difference as well. So show that you're familiar with what they do and that you mirror your enthusiasm for what they do as well. And it's also good if you can broaden your research just beyond the company website. So if you can kind of look for additional ways of getting information, so speaking to individuals who might work there or someone that knows someone that might work there, looking at articles on Lawyers Weekly, checking out Chambers and Partners, Asia Pacific, that's particularly good for some of the commercial mid-tier and top-tier firms as well. They've got like lots of information as well on the businesses. So really, really important to do your research. And I think probably this is one of the areas where people maybe get a little bit unstuck because they leave it to the last minute.
I would also suggest, Susan, that to follow the firms that you're interested in on LinkedIn.
Yeah, brilliant.
Because they will often have articles, comments on current topics, and really choose a topic that, or a practice area that interests you. So it's much easier to talk about because A, you've got an interest, and B, if you start reading some articles in an area, a practice that they offer, then you're much more confident, and that will be conveyed in your application.
Yeah, that's true. No, that's really, really good. And I think kind of that's where you can stand out if you can come up with some points of difference about that firm that other people wouldn't have read and got that from other sources. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about what employers are looking for. So in terms of what we call the legal smarts are just for starters, and obviously it's not just about your legal skills, it's much, much broader than that. And the skills that are sought after will vary according to the different areas that they practice in. However, I think that it is safe to say that all these skills are really, really highly valued. So the entrepreneurial, someone that's innovative, that looks at ways of working smarter, that questions things, that's curious, that asks why. Also, flexibility, adaptability, and resilience. We know that they are huge factors, and what better example of that than now in the current situation that we're in? You would have to argue that your adaptability skills and your resilience would be absolutely critical to getting through this time. And I wouldn't even, I wouldn't doubt that there will be questions around that in interviews as well, in terms of, how you've adapted and adjusted to the challenging times. The innovation is also really, really important, and the growth mindset. So rather than having the fixed mindset where you feel like you know everything, that you're not open to feedback, and you have a very, very much a closed mindset, as opposed to someone that is all about learning from mistakes. They're prepared to push themselves outside of their boundaries and take risks. So growth mindset, there's a lot of work and studies that have been done on that, particularly by Carol Dweck. So the interpersonal relationship building, client focus. So we know the importance of the ability to build really, really positive relationships with people, collaborative relationships, also the high emotional intelligence, being able to read cues, not just about listening to what people say, but also about the non-verbal cues as well. And also the global mindset. I mean, we live and we work in a global a world, so it is really, really important that you are able to think globally. And if you've got any language skills, we know that definitely they are really highly valued. And I remember at one stage, Morrison Blackburn, I think they had a class action against Volkswagen. This was years ago, and they were looking specifically for people that had German skills. So it's important to play up your language skills, definitely. And the last one around having your legal kind of technology, digital skills is really, really critical, particularly at a time like this when we're working in a virtual framework. And it's really, really important that you're comfortable with technology and you're able to work with your clients as well to offer innovative digital solutions. I thought I'd just briefly mention a couple of organisations. So I went and I had a look at a few different organisations. So I had a look at one of the commercial law firms, Mallesons, and then I also contrasted it with some other firms, organisations in other areas, just to look at some of the typical skills they're looking for. So Mallesons talks about an international mindset, an ambition to work across a challenging global landscape, talks about having legal project management, knowledge management, innovation, social and self-development and client focus, also to be driven to achieve results for your client, to have commercial skills and an interest in the market and what's happening beyond law, because fundamentally that is who you're working for. So to really have that broader mindset. Victorian Legal Aid, or the VLA, they talk about skills such as cross-cultural awareness, client communication and advocacy skills. A government organisation, the ACCC, they talk about resilience, ability to adapt to a fast-paced, ever-changing work environment, ability to acquire new skills, understand complex concepts quickly and apply to different situations, analytical, critical thinking and problem solving. And then family law, they look for obviously your ability to build client relationships, that eye for detail, time management in a fast-paced environment, exceptional grammar and written skills, so clearly doing a lot of writing, and resourceful research and analytical skills. And they also talk about having legal practice management software and superior interpersonal skills. So that's a fairly extensive list of skills. Anything I haven't covered, Jackie?
No, I think that certainly covers.
No. Yeah, not asking for much, are we? Okay. So the hierarchy of skills evidence is really, really important, because we talk about where is it best to evidence your skills and your achievements when you're putting your applications together. So if you look at the very, very kind of the bottom end there, or the bottom of the pyramid, the academic and university environment, then we go into your extracurricular activities and your volunteering. And then we look at your other workplace, which might be like casual part-time jobs for those that are working in hospitality, retail, McDonald's jobs, those types of things. And then we've also got legal related workplace as well. So I think kind of the important thing there is to remember that employers are looking for examples from a variety of settings. So it is much better if you're able to draw examples at the top of the pyramid, as opposed to drawing from the same evidence pool as the bottom. So a classic example of that is when you give an example of teamwork, if you're only able to give an example of teamwork in a university environment where you've worked on a group assignment, you could argue that that won't necessarily be as valuable if you could give an example of where you've worked in another retail job, or even better, if you're able to draw an example from one of the internships or legal placements that you've done. So just keeping that in mind, if you're able to just draw from the top two areas, that's going to just put you in a better position. But if you don't have legal related experience yet, then it's still early days, particularly if you're in the earlier stages of your degree, and you've still got time to develop that. And important there that you can also just use the methodology of STARS or CARS. And basically what a CAR is it's a context, action and result. So in the context, you would describe where you were at the time, who you were working for, what was the situation where you used that skill. And then the action would be what the actual steps that you took were, including examination of the alternative options, and then what was the result. So was it a positive result? Perhaps was it something that you could do a little bit differently with the benefit of hindsight? So just keep in mind that CARS can be quite a useful way when you are demonstrating and evidencing your skills. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of applications and resumes and cover letters. So on the left-hand side, I talk about the critical things there around the style and format. So I think that a lot of those will be self-explanatory. I think kind of important there just to mention the white space as well, how it is really, really important that you have enough white space so that there are not like huge dense pieces or blocks of text, because it makes it very, very hard on the reader. Also avoid putting in images, tables, pictures, as they can also add to clutter. And sometimes if firms are using tracking systems, it can also create a little bit of confusion. So on the left-hand side, I don't know if there's anything there that needs further clarification. If it does, just call out later on. If we look at the right-hand side in terms of what the content is, I think it's really important just to mention a couple of things there. So the career overview and objective are optional. And I know that when I spoke to firms about whether they think that's useful, a lot of them said that for new graduates and people that were very early in their career, they felt that a career objective was actually fairly fluffy, and it could be quite motherhood and really didn't give a lot of substance. So I would just be aware and cautious of including a career objective. The other thing is that you obviously have to tailor it to the area of law, to the organisation, to the role. So that's something that potentially is very, very critical to do as well. But where I would suggest is that you use a career overview, particularly for people that have had previous careers before. So they've worked in other fields. I think a career overview is a lovely way to bring together what you've done in the past, what your areas of expertise are, and why you have transitioned into law, and maybe a quick summary of the sectors that you've worked across. So it's really a little bit of the equivalent of a pitch, of a 30-second pitch, approximately 3 to 5 sentences, what you're great at, what you're most interested in, and how you can provide value to a prospective employer. The other thing is the key skills and competencies as well. I know that often at universities, they suggest that you have a whole section called key skills, and you include teamwork, time management, communication, and then you give like 3 or 4 dot points to back up each point. I would suggest just tread lightly with that. I'm not so sure whether that is something that is valued. I would think another option would be to weave your key skills and competencies into your actual responsibilities. And I'll give you an example of that before. So making sure that you're using the skills that they're asking for in the job, you're actually tying those into your other positions that you've been in. Legal experience first. I would put your legal experience on your front page of your resume because that's your prime real estate, and that is often the most critical page. And often if a recruiter, a line manager doesn't like what they see on the first page, they might not even go to the next page. A credible set of achievements. So I would be really, really focusing on this concept of achievement. So this is your value add. This is the extra things that you have done beyond your day-to-day responsibilities. So it would be about you explaining how you've contributed to or you've supported your team's projects and initiatives, and it's about quantifying your achievements. So this can include any type of dollar savings. It can be about sales. It can be about programs that you've delivered on time or under budget. It can be a simple idea that you've come up with, a design of a spreadsheet that has also saved time and reduced errors. So it doesn't have to be big things here. We're talking about significant, or not even significant, just some type of a value add that is a quick reference point for what you can bring to the organisation. So just a couple of other things there. What shouldn't go on a CV? So Jackie, what do you think some of the things that we need to keep off a CV?
My ATAR or my Year 12 results.
Right, okay. Would you not include your ATAR at all?
I don't know. I don't think I would for a graduate position. No.
Yeah, okay.
Do you think
Yeah.
so?
Well, look, it's interesting. I would say in terms of like your VCE, I would include your VCE if you're just recently graduated. I would, but I think it comes a point of time where if it gets like a significant amount of years, it's going back too far, and it would be assumed that you'd have your VCE to do your law studies anyway. So I think kind of just every piece of information you have to really, really question whether it is going to support your application and whether it's going to add value. Yeah.
Yeah.
So things like date of birth, photos, keep them for LinkedIn, fancy fonts, fancy formats, your whole life story. We don't need to know where you went to high school, where you went primary school and things like that. All right, so I've now just put up an example of an application, and this one would be for someone that has probably like a recent graduate, someone that doesn't have a huge amount of experience, but they still do have experience. So that's why I haven't included a career objective. So haven't included address there. And in terms of the LinkedIn, I just noticed that it just really needs to be your name and the URL. Yeah, get rid of those numbers. Sorry, that's a mistake. Education qualifications, yeah, just very, very easy to read. Anything that highlights that you obviously did it well in legal research methods. You also participated in the Kirby contract moot, etc. Then legal experience, so just a list there of the different roles that you've had, and you'll see there what I mean by weaving your actual skills into the role. So anything where you can reference client engagement, file management, evidence preparation, drafting and amending documents and correspondence, or attending and conducting client interviews, conducting online searches, legal research, anything like that is really, really good. And I mean, I think it's kind of important for the VLA one, where I talked about communicating empathetically and effectively with clients from multiple socio-economic disadvantaged backgrounds. That would be particularly critical if you're applying for a role with the VLA or a community legal centre, where obviously that's exactly what you're going to be doing, and to showcase those skills. Okay, and then you'll see there that I've included previous experience as well outside of law. So I've called it retail employment, and what I've done there is just included a role with Coles Supermarket, because that seems to be a very, very common one. And then, yeah, just a quick summary of what your responsibility was, and there, quick snapshot of your key achievements, and wherever possible, if you can quantify them. And I know that there'll be a lot of you that will be saying, oh, very, very hard to quantify things like that. But I think that it really is just a matter of stepping back and thinking about what are some of my achievements, and even asking your manager or asking other people, what do you think, I did really, really well, what are some of my strengths, and then being able to actually talk to those. Volunteering and community contribution, that's something that's really, really important there. Once again, tying it into the types of skills that you were using as well. We've talked about language skills and how important they are, and professional associations, just to show that you're involved and you're keeping up with practice. And I haven't got interests here, but yeah, maybe Jackie, do you want to talk about interests? Because I know that you had a good example of how interests actually worked really well for you.
So on my applications, certainly at the start when you're applying for clerkships, that you don't have a lot of legal experience necessarily on your CV. And I had completed the Lawn Pier to Pub swim for a few years, and I put that in there, and often at interviews it was the first thing that people asked me about. And I think it demonstrates to potential employers that, I have a level of commitment and drive. I can be committed to a race. I have to do the training, even though it's a tough race and it feels like you're swimming in a washing machine, I saw it through as much as,
Yeah.
challenge. And it was a really good thing to just, it was something that employers picked up, they liked, it was easy to talk about, and it was often something that broke the ice too at an interview. So I found it always really useful to include things like that, and it might be something, scuba diving, so your qualifications to be able to scuba dive safely, your passion for other sports or your other interests. I think when you're early in your career, then it's really good to include those things.
Yeah, I agree. They're good icebreakers, and often it just kind of is a great way to lighten the mood, even when you start the interview as well. But you'd be surprised. So whatever you put down there, as long as you're able to back it up, just in case you get asked a question about your prowess in that particular area. All right, so we're now going to move on to cover letters, and I can't stress how cover letters are really your opportunity to build a connection with the reader. So more so than a resume, So your cover letter is where you can infuse your personality and show your enthusiasm and your passion, as long as it is enthusiastic, it's authentic, and also that it is based on what the organisation actually does. So you get it right in terms of the practice areas and the clients. So you really need to make sure that what you're enthusiastic about is in actual fact something that the firm is involved in. So that will be, once again, back to the old research, and avoiding that cut and paste job. So no cutting and pasting. And yeah, definitely about owning it, because if you get called into an interview, you'll get asked questions and you need to be able to talk to those. So if you start to unwind and kind of fall apart and you can't actually evidence it, then there's obviously going to be a disconnect between your application and your actual performance in the interview. And sometimes it's good just to read it out aloud, just to make sure that the tone's right, that it's positive. Don't include all the things that you don't have. And I've seen that before, where people are too honest and they start to talk about all the things that they don't have in the position. And also, I think kind of one of the biggest mistakes or areas for improvement that I see is that often it can come across that it's all about you, and that it's all about what's in it for me. And there's lots of I, and why this is going to be fantastic for me. But there's nothing about the organisation, and why you really want to work for them, and why you're excited to work for them. So always remember that it's critical to kind of get that happy balance.
Mhm.
Obviously has to address the selection criteria. So it can't be just a blanket cover letter. We talked about evidence-based skills and achievements, and that's really, really critical. And I would suggest one page. I think that once you get beyond one page, you are asking too much from your reader, who, remember, has got like a huge pile of applications to get through. So there should be no reason why you can't try and limit it to one page. And I would say just around four paragraphs as a guide. So I've just given an example of what might go into your 4 paragraphs. So the first one is very much about why you're actually applying for the position. What is it about that organisation that stands out? Is it the area of practice that they're in? Is it the type of clients or the types of issues that they'd be dealing with? Anything that stands out for you about that organisation. And if there's anyone that you know or you've met, say at the LIV Careers Fair, don't forget to reference that. That's really important. If you can make a link in the first paragraph, it's a great way to start the letter. Second paragraph, where you would actually go into how you match the selection criteria. You talk about the more functional specific requirements that they're looking for. So I refer to that as the technical key selection criteria, and use specific examples of that. The third paragraph would be other relevant skills, experience, anything else that maybe makes you stand out that you want to bring in, and that could include other experiences outside of law as well. And then the fourth paragraph is just reconfirming your interest and alignment for the role, the good match, and just confirming that you have uploaded or attached the relevant documents. So that's just an example. There are no rules saying that you have to do it this way. It just could be a way of maybe just having a more structured and logical approach. So important when you're putting your cover letter together, that you're actually answering those 3 questions. So, can you do the job? Will you do the job? And will you fit in? So from my experience, you can interview people and you can see that they've got all the skills, the technical, functional, non-functional technical skills, the experience, the knowledge to do the job. But if they haven't got the motivation, the enthusiasm, the passion to do the job, then I would say that would be a deal breaker and could stop you from getting to the next stage. So that's why that whole narrative and that whole kind of personalized story is really, really important. So I just wanted to share with you here an example of a cover letter. And this was actually from a student that I worked with. And I've obviously left off other parts of the letter. And he was happy for me to share it with the participants today. And this letter got him through to the next stage, to the interview stage. So if we just go through it very, very briefly, the VHIA, that's the Victorian Hospitals Industrial Association, and they're a employer organisation. They represent all public hospitals and health services. And they do a lot of work around providing award and agreement interpretation advice to members. They provide advice on employment, industrial relations, enterprise bargaining agreements, just to give you a little bit of background. So the first thing here, if you look at the start, is that I think it's a really positive, strong start. So he's used words like incredibly excited at the prospect of exploring this area. He makes reference to his other experience as well, his volunteering work and his other employment, and also talks about his avid interest in industrial relations. In the next paragraph, he talks about his workplace law, not only as part of his undergraduate law degree, but he also talks about it as his elective when he was doing his PLT. So it really kind of jumps out and hits you that he is actually evidencing that he enjoyed these areas. And he mentions that they provided him with the foundations to substantiate his knowledge in the area. In the third paragraph, he talks about his specific work experience in employment law, and he talks about the disability discrimination or legal service, and he has clearly focused on the areas that involved employment law disputes as well, and how that helped him analyse the relevant legislation and case law. And he also talked about the jurisdiction and improving client positions as well. He then went on and he talked about his experience in hospitality, and interestingly, he was involved in a situation that involved the Fair Work Act, and he talked about how that experience bolstered his ability to add value to the development of the VHIA's material. So that was kind of like just a very clever way of weaving that in. And then in the last paragraph, which I personally might even put at the beginning of my cover letter, he added the personal bit in, and it was like the reason why he wanted to work for this organisation. So he really talked about his passion and his interest in this area as a result of having family members with disabilities and mental health illnesses. So that is something very personal, and it's not for everyone, and I don't encourage everyone to just automatically share that type of thing if they're not comfortable with it. I think it just can be a useful way of really explaining why he is so passionate and interested in making a difference to this area. So that's an example of a cover letter, and we know that that cover letter worked and got him through. So we're now going to go on and just go through the answers to the quiz. Hopefully you got them all right. So just trying to think if there's anything there, Jackie, that you think is important to mention. We talked about the interests, the lawn pier to pub one, the bottom.
Got to unmute. I think it's quite important not to, I know some people do like to use different fonts or colours and things. Definitely don't go overboard on them. Definitely kind of the simpler the better almost.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, keep it kind of just minimalist.
Yeah. And, you know, try and think really broadly about what skills and experience you can obtain. So I sort of was really lucky and had a real wide variety of experiences, from volunteering at a community legal centre to working at the Law Institute. Towards the end of my degree, I even worked a little bit at one of the large plaintiff law firms in very different roles. So think very broadly about opportunities that are out there. And probably whilst we're in this time of isolation, do your research. It's a really good time to think about where you might want to go and how you're going to get there, and look at all the different organisations, the traineeships, the clerkships, volunteering, and just see what's out there, because there is so much variety nowadays, and it will be just the little pieces, building blocks on your CV.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And this is a good time to be doing it. You're right about that. Yeah. So I don't know how everyone did, but don't worry if you didn't do as well as you were hoping. The good news is that you've got lots of time to start working on it. So that brings us to an end of the presentation. And I thought that now we could open it up to any questions that anyone might have from myself or from Jackie. So we'll just give it a couple of minutes just to see if any questions come through.
I'm also happy for people to email me and ask me any questions about my experience or application. So I might put my email address in here too.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I'm not sure. Maybe we've stunned everyone. Yeah, no questions. Just give it a couple more minutes, but best of luck with putting your applications together. We've got one question. Two questions now. I'm just trying to get my questions. Okay. All right. So just a basic question on exclusions. Do you recommend that high school be omitted? I've had an interviewer ask me if I was embarrassed about my high school by excluding it. Also, do you recommend excluding home address and date of birth? Right. Definitely don't see the need to put your date of birth in. And the reason why the home address one's an interesting one, I think that there can be cases of unconscious bias. So I would probably suggest that you leave your address out. But if, however, you're applying for a position that was just very, very close, you might want to. But there can be some people that make conclusions, jump to conclusions that if you live half an hour away from where you're going to be working, that you might be a retention risk. So that's why it just sometimes means that people might make assumptions. So I would possibly say leave it out unless you think it's going to be valuable. In terms of your high school, look, I don't see why you don't include your high school if you've recently finished your year 12, you've gone straight to uni. That's fine to put it in. It's just that, like, when you've done maybe your VCE 10 years ago, and once again, some people like to put their schools that they did it in. If it's a prestigious private school, they think that that might assist their application. But I would actually beg to differ and say that in some cases that might not do you justice. So I think it's very much play it by ear. Another question: how many applications would you suggest to submit to secure a traineeship? I think I'd be selective. I think I wouldn't be just applying for any position unless I felt like a real interest in the organisation and the practice area. So I would tend to go for quality rather than quantity. And also the applications require so much work that I think it's absolutely exhausting if if you're applying for something like 50. I probably just really go with the ones that you're interested with, the ones that kind of make your heart sing and excite you more, than worrying about applying for every single one. Another question around, I'm a bit older, having spent a fairly decent amount of time in my current career after my first degree. I was wondering, would that make me less desirable when applying for work? I would say no, absolutely not. I think that work experience, maturity, life experience is all something that is really, really valued, particularly in the legal profession. I think that there are some areas, particularly in law, where that would be really, really valued. So don't, I don't know what you think, Jackie, but I'd be really proud to include it, but it's just how you include it and the way you describe it. Yeah.
Well, if it's an area that you want to use to move into, say, for instance, if you were previously in health and you wanted to move into medicine and law and something like that, then it's an obvious entry to emphasising all of that in your application. I definitely would use it. Nothing to be lost, really. And even if it's an area that you're not wanting to move into, where you've worked previously, then there are so many skills you've learnt from the other occupation. So I don't think in any way it's going to hold you back at all. I think it's a positive.
Absolutely, and there'd be just such a myriad of transferable skills that you could use and evidence. So no, I think definitely, be proud of that. I'm a mature graduate, just graduated, and was always running my own business to subsidise my uni degree. Never had proper legal experience. What would be your advice? My other degree is in science. Yeah, once again, I think that's so valuable to all the skills and knowledge that you've got from running your own business. So I would definitely maybe put that even in a key skills, key capabilities section of your CV, where you reference what those particular skills were, and think about what some of your achievements were as well when you list that experience. And science as well. Look, particularly, I mean, if you were looking for a role where kind of science and law intersected, then your science would be really, really important to include.
Oh yeah, and running your own business. I mean, that just gives you such a fantastic range of experience and skills to include. So definitely, I put it probably high up in my CV. I would imagine a lot of employers would really like to see that you've had the ability to run your own business.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm a overseas fresh law graduate from Hong Kong, and most of my internships are done in Hong Kong. Will employers think that they are not that relevant since I did not study Australian law?
I think that I would focus on international and global law firms that are also clearly based in Australia. So they would seem like an obvious one to me to apply to first.
Mm.
because a lot of them actually have placements overseas anyway. So you're actually coming with that skill set already. So again, I think it's a real positive if you can see what you can, any experience you can pick up here, whether it would be volunteering, just to bolster that. But certainly, I think that is really useful.
Yeah, I agree. Um, the next question about changing careers, and also um, thinking that maybe you're overqualified. Also mentioning change of careers after having kids, and should family be left out of the cover letter? Look, my perspective on that, I don't know what you think, Jackie, but I don't think you need to necessarily mention your family in your cover letter. I think it's good to talk about maybe why you changed careers, so how you can build on your previous experience and what your previous experience will bring to your new career in law. So I think it's important in your cover letter to mention why you went back as a later student to study law. Because sometimes if you don't have that in the cover letter, people can just make assumptions and not quite understand why you did that. So I think that's something really, really important. And it depends on how much experience you've got, but you could always just put the key achievements in some of that earlier experience, without even necessarily putting in the years that you did it in, if it was a significant amount of time. But I think kind of anything like that's really, really good to highlight. And I personally don't think you need to mention about your family. That's my feeling.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. Next question. I have a background in media and content production, and I'm concerned it's quite different to legal work in firms or VLA. Particularly concerned since my legal work experience is minimal. Would you say there's something to be said for waiting and gaining more skills and experience? Um, I don't know about waiting. I think that I would be just out there. I would be looking at maybe where your experience in media and content production, like media law, maybe some of the firms that specialize in that area that would be particularly interested in your area. um, I would be I would be targeting those firms, maybe some of the smaller ones. I would be reaching out to them and talking about the key kind of skills that you've got from your previous career and how they would move across to law. And I would be, trying to just, definitely bolster and boost your law experience. And voluntary is still, it's still good because you've still got like a number of skills there. Yeah. Um, I want to get into elder law. I'm not sure about that one, how you go about getting into elder law. Um,
I would probably, if I was wanting to do that, I would try and look at, I think there's a few organisations that say are advocates for residents in aged care facilities. And I think from memory, one or two of those organisations are voluntary. So if that's the area you want to work in, then you want to see if you could volunteer in something like that. So it's not strictly a legal voluntary role, but if you were able to gain some experience at one of those organisations, that would be really important, I think.
Okay, all right. And then we've got another last question. I'm a solicitor but don't have any experience as a solicitor. As I move back to my home country, um, do I apply for solicitor jobs or legal assistant paralegals?
Um,
Yeah,
um,
I'm just trying to
I
understand
think,
that. Yeah.
I mean, you can do both, but sometimes it might be a good step in to get some experience as a paralegal first. Um, the beauty in some regards to working as a paralegal is that you if you haven't been in the context of a law firm before, then you will quickly learn how law firms operate. And if you are able to demonstrate your willingness to learn and want to take the next step in your career, most employers really love employees who are willing to progress and show enthusiasm and eagerness. So if you're kind of demonstrating you're willing to go beyond, then they're probably very excited to then, if you have the requisite skill set, to then be employed as a solicitor.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, it would be around going out and having conversations with people and kind of seeking their advice. And now, obviously in the current environment, harder to do that. Obviously face to face, but there is still, maybe that's an opportunity for you to have some conversations through Zoom meetings, and just to kind of ask people for their advice as well about kind of best way to get started. We'll just take a couple of last questions because we're out of time. What is a good place to start looking for legal-based work, especially for someone who has retail experience and some internship experience? Too many firms ask for years of experience. Yeah, I mean, look, that's kind of the old vicious circle, isn't it? That you've got to get experience and you need someone to give you a go. I would say I would be looking at suburban law firms. I would be looking regional. I would be looking, country. I would be even looking at maybe going to Northern Territory, Alice Springs, somewhere like that. I'd be looking at your volunteering opportunities here. There's I think it's the Federation of Legal Community Centres. They have a number of positions that are advertised. I would be basically just targeting organisations, and I would be looking at voluntary work as well.
Mm.
Yeah. The last question about the oversupply of graduates. Certain firms are reducing clerkships and graduate intakes. Would you recommend increasing the number of applications? And do you have recommendations regarding alternative entry paths to law if unsuccessful in those traditional pathways? Yeah, I mean, look, I think that clerkships and the graduate programs are only one way of looking for work, and that they're fiercely competitive. So I think that I would definitely be just broadening my search. I think I would be just thinking about getting as much experience as I could and just broadening the range and developing kind of the level of your skills around those ones that we put up before that employers are seeking. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you have, Jackie, to add to that one.
Yeah, I think it is good to be creative. I know, for instance, just talking about my insurance background, if someone had said to me at law school that I would end up spending so much time in insurance law, probably would have laughed. But also there are a number of lawyers who then move into insurers and are claims managers. So, and they've mostly all got law degrees. So definitely there are so many more opportunities than your standard private practice. So government positions, even if it's in a department that you might want to work in, and you start in a role that's not in legal, the legal team of that department, but you might start and then move across when an opportunity opens.
Yeah, fantastic questions. Thanks very much. They were really, really good questions, actually. We're going to end up now. So, yeah, thank you very much for your time. And just keep an eye out on future webinars that we're going to be running, some really interesting ones. We've got like a whole lot coming up. So just keep an eye out on the College of Law under the events page where they'll all be advertised. And yeah, great time to tuning into webinars and working on your professional development and learning. Yeah. Thanks very much. Bye for now.